Hello and welcome back to this new video. Thank you for joining me. It's been a quiet week and a lot's been happening in terms of what's going on in the world, as we all know. We're always looking through the lens of this channel with a complete open mind to everything that we can discern and decipher for these times that we live in. It's very precarious, more and more as the days go on. We've just had the recent Davos annual meeting with the World Economic Forum, with some surprisingly resistance from the Argentinian president and other speakers. We'll get to that at another time. But it coincides now with the following weeks afterwards. All of a sudden, we're seeing massive protests all over Europe, especially with the farmers from the Netherlands, Italy, France, Germany, even India. And now there's talk about it happening in the UK. Why is this happening? Why is it part of the context of something else? Something even worse to come, which is obviously to do with the constant rhetoric I've been seen popping up on social media platforms, sometimes even on the news media, which isn't always the case. But there's still little parts that I've managed to piece together and put a presentation before you right now with further commentary. So let's decipher why now. As we already know, keep in mind of certain people, certain mystics and saints of the church, visionaries even, such as Marie-Julie Jahenny, the timeline that I've already done in video, which again you can visit here with the links in the channel. So hit the like button, subscribe, share, sit back and watch everything that I'm going to put forward to you in a compilation of a few different videos, and then I'm going to add my own thoughts and commentary on it for the times that we're living in. Here it is. So let's start with the farmers.
Farmers in Germany have staged nationwide protests against the government's plans to cut agricultural subsidies. The protests have blocked roads, caused disruptions across the country on Monday, kicking off a week of protests against the government's subsidy cuts announced at the end of last year. Over 500 tractors and trucks have already parked up by Berlin's Brandenburg Gate. There are also reported blockages in Baden-Württemberg, North Rhine-Westphalia, Saxony, and Bavaria.
Through the haze of smoking flares, more tractors joined the blockade of Paris. Here we saw dozens arriving to join a column that already contained many more tractors. They have brought this motorway to a standstill. Normally a frenetic route into the nearby capital, now completely blocked. These farmers have driven their tractors more than 200 miles to get here.
We are applying pressure on the government and President Macron and Europe. There is no longer any harmony. The UK left Europe, and now there's talk of Ukraine joining. If we did a survey today in France, maybe the French would leave Europe.
He says cheap imports from Ukraine have hit farmers' income and lowered food standards. This sign proclaims tired but still determined. For years, French farmers said that nobody had listened to their complaints. And now, well, this is what direct action looks like. Stopping roads, blockading the capital, and threatening to starve the people of Paris. France is not alone, with farmers' protests now spreading across Europe. These in Italy and also in Belgium. Others are happening in Germany, the Netherlands, and beyond.
A large convoy of hundreds of angry farmers driving heavy-duty tractors arrived at the European Union headquarters in Belgium today. Now, leaders were meeting in Brussels to discuss financing for Ukraine. Farmers threw eggs and stones at the European Parliament, also set fires in the area to press EU leaders to do more to help them with taxes and rising costs. Now, while the farmers' crisis is not officially on the agenda of the EU summit, it is expected to be discussed. Similar protests have been held across the EU for most of the week. Farmers blocked traffic arteries across Belgium, France, and Italy this week.
And we'll leave it there for now. Come back to myself here. So there we are with the farmers. There we are with the fact that this is in multiple nations, and I've missed out many clips shown from India as well and other regions. I think Instagram has shown some great reels of boots on the ground at these protests where the farmers are not just blockading the artery motorways, as the news reporter says, but they're actually going about emptying manure by the tons into places like civil authority, council buildings, government buildings, are just leaving it there all round the entrances and exits. I've seen it even getting lowered into a McDonald's restaurant. I've even seen the farmers going about with the great big hoses from their tanks with all the manure spraying it in all these types of places. And one thing about the French, they know how to protest, but it isn't just France, it's Germany, it's Italy, it's the Netherlands, and now there's talk about it happening in the UK. Prices are already skyrocketing because of the wars, especially the one with Ukraine, which is tied in with a lot of what's happening here with imports. It's civil disunity. It's beginning to build up more of what could be anarchy, civil war, or anything else. Now, if that isn't enough in the mix, something even more frightening is coming along, and it's not here to frighten us, it's here to confirm prophecies, which I'm going to explain shortly. But before I do, let's have a little bit more context of what we're actually seeing now in the world and bring that together with what we already know was coming for these times. Here it is.
To train and equip a citizen army to prepare the country for potential war. That is according to the head of the army, who today said that increasing army numbers in preparation for a potential conflict would need to be a whole-of-nation undertaking. He added that we couldn't rely on our navy and air power, but instead must be able to credibly fight and win wars on land.
The pertinent point he really said was that regular armies start wars, particularly if it's a long war, but it is citizen armies that win them because, of course, you need something to replace the first echelon army, which will be destroyed or will have significant casualties in the first days, months or year of the conflict. And we're at near 700 days of conflict in Ukraine.
So what does that mean when you say citizen armies? What is that? It's still a concept that I think is foreign to many of us and we don't really understand. Who is the citizen army made up of? How are they recruited? How are they trained? How do they fit into normal society? How do you envisage that working?
Well, I think you need to remove the word citizen from this. It is an army which will be created from those who are in civic society, the civilians.
How would it be instituted? How could it be constructed and created? And how quickly could it happen?
Well, the first thing to say is that, of course, as the head of the army, there's a framing bias from him here because he talked about a pre-war moment. Now, you can reverse that, as I would, and say we're in a long peace and have been in Western Europe since 1945. So how do you reinforce the long peace so that what he talks about is not going to come to pass? The first thing you do is turn the notion of as long as it takes for Ukraine into whatever victory takes, because that means that Russia won't be in a position to do anything. The second thing is re-emphasize within NATO, because we are one of 31 nations there, shortly 32 with Sweden, that deterrence and defense works. Article 5, attack on one is an attack on all. But I think there's a subtext here, both in what was said by Admiral Bauer last week in terms of don't assume you're going to be at peace for the next 20 years, and what CGS said, is that there are two significant elections this year. The first one is in Russia. That really doesn't matter because that's not an election. It's just Putin really saying that he's going to be president, Putin 5.0. But the second one that does matter is the one in America, particularly if we have a President Trump who in 2016 in his campaign was talking about Europe and NATO being freeloaders. So it's really if you had a disconnection of the transatlantic alliance that there would potentially be problems. But that said, European NATO outspends Russia by at least 4 times. So the budgets are there, even within Europe. It's whether there's the capability and willingness to employ it without the Americans being alongside us in the worst case.
Lucky to have Tobias Ellwood with us this morning. It's good to see you.
This is good.
Very serendipitous because somebody who you'll know well, General Sir Patrick Saunders, I'm not sure if you served with him, but certainly you have served. You did. So he's suggesting, reading between the lines in the Telegraph today, that if we go to war with Russia, we could find that our youth may have to be conscripted. That's a bit alarming.
Yes.
head of the British Army, one of the most cerebral thinkers that we've got, a strategist, we need to listen and listen carefully. We've been too complacent. I think I've said this many times with you. What's coming over the horizon should shock us. It should worry us, and we are not prepared. We've had a couple of decades, 3 decades or so since the Cold War. Life has gone well. It's now going to get more difficult as authoritarian states exploit our timidity, our perhaps reluctance to really put fires out. And the best example of that is a democracy on the corner of Eastern Europe that in its 3rd year is now in conflict, and we've not resolved that. So Patrick Saunders is saying, prepare for what's coming over the horizon. There is a 1939 feel to the world right now. These authoritarian states are rearming. There's a risk averseness about the West in wanting to deal with that. And institutions, global institutions such as the United Nations, aren't able to hold these errant nations to account. In fact, the UN, I would go further, is reaching its League of Nations moment unless it's reformed. So that's where the world is heading. We need to wake up to that. There's a mindset now of this era of insecurity that we're heading towards, but we're still on a peacetime defense budget of just 2%. That does need to change. And the Red Sea is a great example that if you don't step forward, if you're not robust in dealing with those that are testing the envelope, it will be our weakness will be exploited, and it will affect our economy.
Sorry, the big difference with a year ago, I would say, Terry, is that there's a lot of things that have happened in the armed forces and in the defense organizations. What hasn't happened is in our societies the understanding that it is more than the military that has to be able to operate in a conflict or in a war. It is the whole of society that will get involved, whether we like it or not. That realization, we didn't talk about that much a year ago. If you look back to last year, what has happened in our alliance with regard to the battle groups that we set up, if you look back to the training, the fact that we now have Steadfast Defender with 90,000 troops, that is a record number. That is a record number of troops that we can bring to bear and have an exercise with in that size.
Still not enough.
Across the alliance, across the ocean, from the US to Europe, in Europe. That is a big change. Find it a surprise, and as a result buy a radio on batteries. That is great. It is part of the package that the Swedish government is talking about. You need to have water, you need to have a radio on batteries, and you need to have a flashlight on batteries to make sure that you can survive the first 36 hours. Things like that. That's simple things. But it starts there. The realization that not everything is plannable, not everything is going to be hunky-dory in the next 20 years. I'm not saying it is going wrong tomorrow, but we have to realize it's not a given that we are in peace. And that's why we have the plans.
And there we are, folks. It's not a given that we're at a time of peace, but two of the other people spoke in those videos about this is the first time peace has been broken in Europe since 1945. The other man spoke about the fact that it's been 30 years of peace since the Cold War. Now, I want to get clarity on this with future interviews with Xavier Al and others, because it's trying to fit that timeline of, well, where's this 25 years of peace that was mentioned in some of the prophecies? Is that been now? Because that kind of speaks about it there. John Paul II, after being shot on the anniversary of Fatima, a couple of years later, so he does the consecration of the world, not specifically Russia was asked. Soon enough, it still ended with the Cold War finishing, and no longer do we see communism in the Soviet Empire. It's no longer there, it's crumbled. We have Russia. And Russia has been telling us for a very, very long time, stop coming to our borders with your missiles, your nuclear arsenal that's only minutes away from Moscow, because we have to take defensive measures. And that's what's happening, I believe, in many respects. And it's not because the fact that they're coming for us. There's a 38-year-old man, most of my life has now been watching the Western alliances going further east with NATO, going into the Middle East time and time again, all along, where my country's never once been attacked by a foreign army or invasion. It's the fact that the West keeps pushing it along. And we've been warned for years now that because of this, China, Russia and others have actually built up their military so well and so quickly that we're actually in a state of peacetime budgets, as the man said. And you heard that man, the way he spoke there, the NATO man, he's speaking about things, simple things to have prepared, from flashlights and radios with batteries, just to get through the first 36 hours. Of what? Of war? Of bombs dropping down on us? Of invasions or anything? But of course we need water, we need food storages as well, and that's another topic for another day when it comes to preparedness. Even some of the saints, such as Padre Pio and others, have warned us about having at least a few months' worth of stockpiled foods and stuff. It's not illogical and it's not unreasonable to have this. But I want to first discuss, right, UK conscription may be coming back because these corrupt minimalist amount of people coming together, bringing this about us. I want to know, are you going to sign up for the war? Are you going to sign up for what they have caused, only to be used as cannon fodder? We're living in a time of information, whether it's misinformation or truth, or what does that mean now? We're at a point where we've had so much put to us now that you can see the orchestration of why everything's coming about. And before I get into quoting a couple of other prophecies, hang on to that question and answer about, would you go to this war? Why not want peace instead? Why not the people rising up like the farmers do, demanding our government sit at the table and work out peace? Stop getting the rich getting richer and the poor being poorer, only then to be shoved into the wars that the little amount of people are causing. They can easily be replaced just as anyone else. But before you answer that question to yourself, or even leaving it in the comments below, watch this video of Robert Kennedy. This is absolutely brilliant.
We actually openly go and defy this idea that we don't give Putin the fact that he is in control of a nuclear arsenal, that we want to sort of pick that fight and battle that's been going on for a long time there. And I just wondered, as president, how do you manage that?
You know, Putin every day says, I want to settle the war, let's negotiate. And Zelensky has said, we're not going to negotiate. But Zelensky didn't start that way. I don't want to, belabor the history, but Russia was invaded 3 times through Ukraine. The last time Hitler killed 1 out of every 7 Russians. They don't want to have Ukraine join NATO. So when the wall came down in the Soviet Union, Europe, Gorbachev destroyed himself politically by doing something that was very, very courageous. He went to Bush and he said, I'm going to allow you to reunify Germany under a NATO army. I'm going to remove 450,000 Soviet troops, but I want your commitment. After that, you will not move NATO 1 inch to the east. And we solemnly swore we wouldn't do it. Well, then in 97, Brzezinski was the first of the neocons, said, we're going to move NATO 1,000 miles to the east and take 15 countries into it and surround the Soviet Union. So then we not only move it into 14 new nations, but we unilaterally walk away from our 2 nuclear weapons treaties with the Russians. And we put Aegis missile systems in Romania and Poland 12 minutes from Moscow. When Russians did that to Cuba, in '62, we came this close to nuclear war until they removed them. So the Russians don't want nukes 400 miles from Moscow. We then overthrow the Ukraine government. In 2014, their elected government, and put in a Western sympathetic government. Russia then has to go into Crimea because they have a port. It's their only warm water port. And they know the new government that we just installed is going to invite the US Navy into their port. So Russia then went into Crimea without firing a shot, because the people of Crimea are Russian. Then the new Ukrainian government we installed started killing ethnic Russians in Donbass and Lugansk, and they voted to leave and join Russia. Putin said, I don't want them. Let's give them protection and give them semi-autonomy and make an agreement to keep NATO out of Ukraine. That treaty was written by Germany, France, Russia, and England, the Minsk Accords. And the Ukrainian parliament, which is controlled by ultra-rightists, and that's a nice way of talking about them, refused to sign it. Zelensky runs in 2019. He's an actor. Why did he get elected with 70% of the vote? Because he promised to sign the Minsk Accords. He promised peace. He gets in there and he pivots. Nobody can explain why, but we know why. Because he was threatened with death by ultra-rightists in his government and a withdrawal of support by the United States by Victoria Nuland, who's the leading neocon in the State Department. We told him he could not sign it. So then the Russians go in, they don't send a big army, they only send 40,000 people. It's a nation of 44 million people. They clearly do not intend to conquer Ukraine, but they want us back at the negotiating table. We won't allow Zelensky to go back, so he goes to Israel and Turkey and says, will you please help me negotiate a treaty? The Russians just want a guarantee that Ukraine won't join NATO. Zelensky signs the treaty, Putin's people sign the treaty, and Putin starts withdrawing the Russian troops in good faith. And what happens? Joe Biden sends Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, over to Ukraine in April and forces him to tear up the treaty. And since then, 450,000 kids have died who none of them should have died. For every one Russian that dies, 5 to 8 Ukrainians die, and they don't have any men left. You know, we're giving them all these weapons, but they don't have men left. It's a catastrophe, and we look kind of like the aggressor. That's the way the rest of the world sees us.
So we have an actor president stepping up after a coup in Ukraine, which was backed up with America. You can find more facts on that if you do the digging. And taking death threats seriously to his own life, he's therefore preserved his life, becoming a Western puppet, and brought his corrupt country into warfare with Russia at the cost of 450,000 Ukrainian lives for his own self-preservation. Does that sound like a great leader to go down in history? And why was it Israel and Turkey being mentioned? And I tell you what, since then till now, when Hamas attacked on October 7th, the Feast of Our Lady of Victories, Our Lady of the Rosary, the Battle of Lepanto, it's Turkey is verbalising a lot with Israel and what's going on. And now we're massing more and more in the Red Sea. We're getting closer to Iran with the Houthis, and further strikes now spread into Syria and Iraq because of it all, as well as in Yemen. We're on the brink of World War III. There's no doubt about it. And I want to just refer you just to a couple of quotes that have been done in clearer presentations in previous videos on the channel, and I urge you to watch them. But here's just a couple of things I wanted to show you first before I start giving my overall opinion on the matter and probably going off on a tirade or a rant. Watch this. Here's a few slides of previous presentations that I've put together. The nun on the left here is Blessed Elena Aelio, and I just want to focus a quote with her here. She speaks about great justice, tremendous earthquakes, famines. I just want to keep with the farmers. Great earthquakes, hurricanes, and all sorts. If people do not recognise the scourges of the nature of the warnings of the time of divine mercy, worse is going to come. And down here we've got, if the underlining part here, if the people do not recognise in these scourges of nature the warnings of divine mercy, and do not return to God with truly Christian living, another terrible war will come from the east to the west. Russia, with her secret armies, will battle America, will overrun Europe. Take that in. Russia will take on America and will overrun Europe. The River Rhine, it's a good geographical point as it's quoted in further ones I'm going to show. The River Rhine will be overflowing with corpses and blood. Italy also will be harassed by a great revolution, and the Pope will suffer terribly. Again, natural calamities has all been warned. Again, the famines, earthquakes and such. Civil war in France is the spark. Pay close attention to the Yellow Vest protest, the farmers' protest in France, which is affecting many other nations. This is us simmering up. We're still to get boiling point to come. But Italy, yet again, these prophetic countries are the ones all on the news just now. Italy is also prophesied to endure much of the hardship, as well as England, with revolutions and wars. Again, persecution of the church, which is for another day. Certain cities, such as Paris and Marseille, will be obliterated by Russia and the Mohammedans, as we know as the Muslims, which is all to do with this mass migration, and I'm going to get to that in a new way shortly. And again, I urge you to watch this video in full with the timeline. Out of all the videos I've done with Xavier Arral and putting all prophecy ones together, this is the one that you should be looking on. And I'll put a marker up the top as well as a link in the description box. Bringing it all together in context, as you'll see the timeline from La Salette right through now until 2025. Because as we discovered in 1999 in the Vatican archives, there was a secret letter given from the visionary Maxim of La Salette speaking about how all this stuff will come about by the first quarter of the 21st century. And Marie-Julie Jahenny has a quote in Xavier's book, which doesn't make it too clear, of 80 or 83, the years. And in his research, he's added those numbers onto 1941, which was the period of her death, which brings us to 2021 to 2024, in which, in her prophecies during that period, still fit and therefore by 2025, if the latest is 2024, 83 added on to 1941. What did she say? Yes, there's the years. There would be the end of a reign of an English queen. Queen Elizabeth II was the longest reigning queen ever in the history of England. So that's done, correct. Tensions between England, Israel and Persia, as Marie-Julie Jahenny announced back in the 1800s. We're talking about the Middle East and Iran today. Have we noticed that since King Charles has been on the throne within this year? And the mass Muslim immigration into Europe. Putting that together, therefore, there's the four popes of Garabandal. We're in the even year. We're at Francis at the end of St. Malachy, coincidentally coming at the time of Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich. Queen Elizabeth has died within this time, and we're seeing exactly what's going on with the warfare in the Middle East, and it's heating up with Iran being the big target. So it's not being presented to you at fast pace to keep you going and filling your adrenaline the next thing to the next thing. I want it to be serious to a point where this is unscripted and coming off the top of my head. No doubt there'll be future videos to bring some other things about and clarifications. But this is right at our doorstep, whether you're American, whether you're European, British, French, German, doesn't matter. The amount of mobilisation of troops and the biggest record of 90,000 troops of NATO in practice, but yet Russia's ready with 500,000 troops before it even looks into the rest of its nuclear arsenal and everything else. And don't forget China and Taiwan. The prophecies are clear from Xavier's book. America won't look to come to the aid of the rest of NATO because it'll already be in warfare with China in the Pacific. Plus, this year of prophecy has already shown Trump is up for re-election. Now, if he becomes president again, he may pick up where he left off with the NATO alliances. But at the same time, he's promised peace with Ukraine, speaking with Russia, Zelensky, Putin and Xi Jinping of China. Now, if he can bring a peace agreement quickly, that tells me, as it should tell you, he's not part of this corrupt establishment. Why would they not bring peace to Ukraine when Putin was already shown good faith of taking his troops back? But Zelensky turned around after that visit with Boris Johnson, the little puppet of America, going over there to say, don't do it. It's the West that has the plan of aggression that's pushing all this forward. And that's where it comes back to that question after watching Kennedy speak there. Why would you want to go through conscription, serving your nation, whether you're a UK citizen or any other one that's ready to get pulled into this war? This is your banks, your big pharma, your so-called elites, whatever that means to a human being. They're still the same as the rest of us. But why would you want to go in as cannon fodder to bring in their agenda where they stay rich, you stay poor if you survive, and then the lineage goes on to the next one? But this is something that we have to take very seriously, because we've been getting told now for way over a century by Our Lady, our Blessed Mother, that this was coming. There's many quotes of the saints and mystics about all this as well. It's all in the channel. That's why I'm doing the videos. And we have to get to the point of being serious. We have to rise up against, not against our own governments, but we have to rise up and let them know that we are the people of this nation. We are the ones that want peace. We are the ones that are not looking for war. Why is it so many few people in governments, in big pharma or big corporations that are making this happen? Because we know when you've got big conspiracy theorists labelled men, which I think are predicting so many things correctly now, such as Alex Jones and others alike, that the fact that they're seeing the things on the world, but they're not seeing the things already predicted in prophecy, which I'm bringing forth. I have the source as to why. We have that source as faithful Christians, as Catholics. And if you're not of any of those religions or faiths or that's fine. In fact, even better. I want this to be a logical way of people to see, right, everything predicted to the year period where we are is all fitting for now. And I'm not worried as such or concerned of this great war coming, because I know where I stand with my faith. I know where I stand in living my faith. And years ago I may have had the knots in the stomach, I may have had worries and fear about all this, but that's all gone. Now that's either gone because I've desensitised myself to all the messages and videos and everything, or I'd like to hope that it's down to living the messages, living the faith, coming to know the God of love, the Father, coming to know Our Lady and listening to the messages that she's telling us. She's giving us the remedies. But there's so much happening in the world that's so clear in this timeline, but not to forget that parallel timeline of the Catholic Church. It's all happening at once. And I'm just looking at a few other notes down here. When it comes to the famines, it could still come about natural disasters. It could come about with the so-called climate change or whatever else. But how much of it's going to take ramifications now of several nations and growing when all the farmers are protesting constantly? No farmers, no food. No food. Anarchy. Panic. Chaos. And this is where the prophecies come in, because you're going to see civil unrest in every European nation, probably, according to prophecy, or at least France, Italy, England, and others perhaps. It's in the prophecies. Russia takes advantage of this and comes over that Rhine River. Now, whatever this means with Blessed Elena regarding Russia's secret armies, Russia are the master of deception, the masters of chess. They know what faces them militarily. They know what faces them from America and NATO. And they've had decades of preparing a way not to take on perhaps head on, but other ways round about it. And this is something that's going to come from east to west according to that prophecy. Russia's to go over the Rhine River is to get right through to France. Now, the big thing right now in the prophecies, especially with Marie-Julie Jahenny, that she speaks about the fact that Russia will make a pact with the Muslims. The civil unrests are all coming to the nations themselves, one way or another. Then the Muslims and the Russians get together. Now, are we talking about Iran, Egypt, Yemen, any other Eastern African military nation coming over the Mediterranean by force? Or could we possibly be speaking about the fact that we've got military-age fighting men coming over in the millions to Europe these past few years? All of a sudden it starts to make a little more sense if it's a greater big plan. Now here's something fresh that came to my mind after watching a movie during the week. I was channel flicking and it was Gangs of New York. Now I watched it, could you believe it was like 20 years or so since that movie was made? Time flies. Now I watched it for the second time in 20 years this week, and you see all the Irish immigrants landing into New York, how they're treated, being taken in and all sorts. But the war was underway with America, and conscription was necessary if the Irish wanted to have their citizenship. They either paid $300, which was way back then, a lot of money in today's price, or they could fight in the military, get their 3 meals a day, and have their citizenship if they survived the war. Why would all these military-age fighting men come over here? You've seen the videos already. 70,000 people are in the whole of the British military. Army, Air, Navy. They could fit in Wembley Stadium. The whole military. But if you've got a million migrants, majority of fighting age males coming in, looking for citizenship, asylum, a great war comes underway again. Maybe sign them up for the conscription and they'll get their citizenship. That's how they'll get their military. That's how they'll get their citizen army. No? It's kind of like coming round full circle again. What goes around comes around. Makes you think. Let me know what you think in the comments below. But I think that's a poignant point right now for me. And then look at the rest of Europe as well, from Germany, Italy, France. It's breaking it's breaking down civil society in these nations. But as soon as a war comes and people gather together for their own sovereignty, this is where it might spark in as part of the bigger plan. But it ain't going to go the West's way, because according to prophecy, it's Russia that they end up favouring. Now why? Well, we know Iran is backing up every Muslim nation along with it in the Middle East. We know that if Iran gets touched, Russia's in there with Iran, China's in there with Iran, and therefore you can see the pact. That's not including the financial agreements bringing in with African nations on top of the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. More people are going east to west because they can probably see that bigger picture that I'm dabbling into a little bit. And I think, therefore, you're going to see that these Muslims in all these nations are going to see the imperial empire of America, the former empire of Britain, and all the colonies that it made through the Commonwealth and elsewhere. And they're going to still have that way of saying, not you, we're choosing them, and this is the revenge, spirit of revenge, shall we call it for now. So there's a lot to think and ponder there. I'm firing it out in all ways, and it goes back to that question, therefore I'll answer myself. Would I sign up? Conscription? First of all, I would say when I was a young boy, I was obsessed with the military, with the army, the paratroopers, the parachute regiment and the SAS. From a young age, I got a lot of sand in the rucksack. I'd be up the back hills tabbing. Joined the Royal Engineer Army Cadets at 15. I went to Aldershot about 16 or 17 years of age, trained with the paras in an insight course. Would I sign up for conscription? Once upon a time, most definitely. As a 38-year-old man and having lived through the era of internet and social media, YouTube and everything else to this present day, I've realised that we have to go hunting the truth. We have to go try and finding the truth other than what's coming to us on a state media platform. And for just a few of the many, many things out there that I've shared with you in this video, I have to ask myself, why would I want to fight a war for the rich to get richer, the elites to remain in power. They're the cause of all this, not you, not me, not the Russians, not the French, not the British, not the American people, the civilians. But yet they're going to get us all up to go and battle this out, to get their own ways, their own agendas, their own profits, at the cost of our lives. It was different if we were being invaded by the Nazis or some other foreign entity that wanted to take us over and enslave us and that. Of course you fight then for sure. But that's not what this is. We're not on the right side of how this is coming about. It's our Western governments that seem to be causing this more and more. And heaven has told us repeatedly, God is not happy with it. And he's warning us in a time of mercy, stop, turn around, change, convert, because this is what's going to befall you. And I think we're very close to it because of things already outlined. So I would always defend my own, my family, where I live, my own personal safety, their safety. But the idea of being conscripted to go far away and fight in a war where no one's done us any harm makes me think of the likes of Muhammad Ali, why he refused conscription. After all, what America caused him as a black man and his family, his ancestry, and now all of a sudden he had to go and fight in Vietnam for the same people, the same country that caused him all this. Vietnam didn't hurt him. The Vietnamese had no wrong to him, as he said. It was Americans that done the wrong to him, and now he's to go and shed his blood for it. So we see him as a hero now. And that's where we need to decide, is this heroic to say no and face your time in jail because you won't play their agenda and their game? But it's also a time where the people need to switch on and gather up and say enough is enough. Look what you're leading us to. You're talking about climate change, but yet we're near nuclear catastrophe by the ways that you're working this. You need to change. You need to get out and get the real people in. Authentic, genuine people that are not looking at anything for ambition's sake. And that is the problem. The spirit of malice, ambition, and everything else that's rife in governments today, the whole moral compass is gone. So now I can say, having been a young teenager, looking to join the paras, being at Aldershot, training with them in the Insight course, being in the Army Cadets and meeting many soldiers along the way at different events and camps and exercises and whatnot, I'd have signed up any time. I was really ready to go for it. And this was just a couple of years before 9/11. But now I see the other side of it and what it really means to be in the army. Yeah, there's adventure, there's fun, there's skills and all this stuff, but you're just cannon fodder for the elite. And are we going to see the way it would have been in the old days with the king spearheading the charge into the enemy? Are we going to be seeing that with the royals in our countries? Are we going to be seeing that with the world leaders who are causing all this? Where are they going to be? So no, I'm not fighting for them. Not at all.
Sir, Lance Corporal Johnson reporting for duty and responding to the appeal from General Sanders for a citizen army and encouraging young people across the country to think of the attractions, advantages of some kind of military training or service. Because at the moment they think it's either uncool or unethical, or perhaps they're not following General Sanders, they're following Colonel Sanders. To find out what we need to do about it, read my column in the Daily Mail.
And as you can tell by my writing above it, the corrupt puppet can fight his own orchestrated war. There's a lot of blood in that man's hands since he stopped Zelensky signing the peace treaty. There's a lot of blood in many hands, and why would we want to spill our blood for them? I'll spill my blood for the Lord, by His grace. Whatever God's will is, it will unfold, no matter what comes, dear friends. So don't lose hope, don't lose faith, no matter what's happening in the world, no matter what's happening in the church. It stands to reason and it stands to testimony the fact that what has been repeated in all these apparitions and these prophecies from Our Lady to the saints and mystics, it renders them worthy of belief when they're rolling out perfectly in time and to the description that they were given. That in itself should serve a point of raising your eyebrows and saying, maybe there is something here. Maybe God does exist. Maybe He wants us to change for the better of ourselves. Maybe it's all true. Think about it. And I think of the fact that it's the youth of this day. Our young people are stuck on computer games. They're stuck on social media. Even the British Army tried to do some sort of recruitment campaign through the game Fortnite, and it backfired. The young people prefer just to play the game rather than doing the real life thing from the comfort of their own home on their own screen. They're too busy crying and making debates over being misgendered and being offended and colouring their hair whatever colour they want. And this is to be our frontline troops. This is how society of the West has went, and you still feel strong enough to stand up against hardened Russians and Chinese for all they've had to went through and endure all these years and now what's facing them. They're sovereign of one heart, of one nation. We are 32 nations if we include Sweden and NATO, all with self-preservation aspects. NATO isn't looking good for many reasons, and the prophecies make it clear. When you see Russia doing what they're doing and how they're going to get a chance when this civil unrest gets worse and they're going to invade over to Europe, then we need to realise that where we are in 2024, when we bring in Garabandal, we bring in Akita, we bring in Fatima, and above all right now for me is La Salette and Marie-Julie Jahenny, that timeline, first quarter of the 21st century, 2024, look what's happened since the Queen died, all that prophecy, look at the state of Israel, Iran, the relationship with Britain, everything the Red Sea. You cannot make this up. You can't. It's bang on. Absolutely bang on. And I think more and more people are becoming aware that we're going into some sort of period. I still don't know what way it's going to go in terms of catastrophe first and then the rebuild. Or is that the time of peace? Or is that the time of worse things or whatever? And that's why I hope to get Xavier Al back on the channel very soon to kind of clarify a few things based on the research that he put into his best-selling book, Revelations. So stay tuned for that. I hope this has came across a little bit in terms of we don't just want to speak of prophecy all the time. We actually want to see it unraveling as it is. And I hope I've done some sort of justice for that. And as always, dear friends, please give us the thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button. It's so important to do to keep this content going and reaching as many people as possible. And the best way you can do that is take just a few seconds, like, subscribe, share, and just send it out there to reach as many as possible. And I look forward to your comments, and I look forward to getting Xavier back on the channel to cover a bit more in depth of the context. And I look forward to future videos coming with you all. Until then, take care and God bless.